In the wide-open plains of Texas, where the sky stretched endlessly and the earth was painted gold by the sun, there lived a woman named Clara. She was a rancher, strong and quiet, with hands calloused from years of hard work. Her husband had died 2 years earlier in an accident while fixing a windmill, leaving her alone to manage the sprawling cattle ranch. The days were long, filled with chores that never seemed to end, feeding livestock, mending fences, and keeping the fields clear of weeds. But despite the loneliness, Clara carried on. She'd grown used to the silence, finding comfort in the rhythm of daily life. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the clouds shades of orange and pink, Clara heard something unusual. It wasn't the sound of crickets or the distant howl of coyotes. It was faint, almost like whimpering. At first, she thought it might be one of her horses injured somewhere near the fence line. Grabbing a lantern, she stepped out into the cool night air, her boots crunching against the dry grass. The noise grew louder as she moved closer to the edge of her property, until finally, she found its source. Huddled under a gnarled mesquite tree were 3 small figures. They looked barely alive, their thin bodies wrapped tightly together for warmth. Their faces were dirty, streaked with dirt and tears, and their clothes hung loosely on their frail frames. Clara froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. She had seen Native Americans before. They often passed through these parts, but she had never encountered children alone like this. Something about their desperate state tugged at her heart. Clara knelt down slowly, holding the lantern high so they could see her face. "Are you hurt?" she asked softly, though she doubted they understood English. One of the boys clutched his sister protectively, his dark eyes wide with fear. The other boy stared blankly, too weak even to flinch. Clara's chest tightened. Whatever had happened to them, it was clear they were starving and exhausted. She didn't hesitate. Setting the lantern aside, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of jerky she always kept with her. Holding it out gently, she said, "Here, take it." The children didn't move at first, but after a few moments, the youngest boy reached out cautiously, snatching the food and retreating quickly. He shared it with his siblings, who devoured it hungrily. Watching them eat broke Clara's heart. These weren't just hungry kids, they were survivors, clinging to life by a thread. Knowing they couldn't stay out here overnight, Clara made a decision. She returned to the house briefly, grabbing a blanket and some water. When she came back, she wrapped the blanket around their trembling bodies and offered the water. Again, they hesitated, but thirst won over caution. Once they'd drunk their fill, Clara gestured toward her wagon parked nearby. "Come with me," she said firmly, hoping her tone conveyed kindness rather than threat. It took several tries, but eventually the children climbed into the wagon. Clara covered them with another blanket and drove them back to the ranch. As they bounced along the uneven path, she glanced back occasionally, catching glimpses of their frightened expressions. She wondered who they were, where they came from, and why they were alone. Were their parents dead? Had they been abandoned? There were no answers yet, only questions swirling in her mind. When they arrived at the ranch, Clara led them inside, her modest home. It wasn't much, a single room with a wood-burning stove, a table, and a few chairs, but it was warm and safe. She lit a fire to chase away the chill and set about making soup. While the pot simmered, she rummaged through her belongings, pulling out old clothes that had belonged to her late husband. They would be too big for the children, but at least they'd provide some warmth. The meal was ready soon enough, and Clara placed bowls of steaming soup on the table. The children eyed the food suspiciously, glancing between her and the bowls. "Eat," she urged, pointing to the soup. After a moment's hesitation, the oldest boy reached for a spoon and began eating. His siblings followed suit, shoveling the soup into their mouths as if they hadn't eaten in days, which Clara realized might very well be true. Watching them eat stirred something deep within her. These children were strangers, yes, but they were also human beings in need. Clara knew she couldn't turn them away. For now, they were hers to care for, whether fate intended it or not. As the fire crackled softly in the background, she resolved to do whatever it took to help them heal. not just physically but emotionally as well. Over the next few days, Clara noticed how skittish the children were. Every sudden movement sent them scurrying, and they flinched whenever she came too close. It was clear they'd been through something traumatic, though she still didn't know exactly what. Determined to earn their trust, Clara adopted a patient approach. She spoke to them gently, using simple words and gestures. She gave them space when they needed it and offered comfort when they allowed it. One morning, while chopping firewood outside, Clara spotted the youngest boy peeking at her from behind the barn. His name, she'd learned, was Nkosi, though he rarely spoke. Smiling softly, she motioned for him to come closer. To her surprise, he did, albeit hesitantly. She handed him a small stick and showed him how to stack the chopped wood neatly. Nkosi mimicked her movements awkwardly at first, but soon he was working alongside her with surprising determination. By the time they finished, his face bore the hint of a smile, the first real sign of happiness she'd seen from any of them. Each day brought new progress. The children began helping around the ranch, learning tasks like feeding the chickens and gathering eggs. In return, they taught Clara bits and pieces of their language, pointing to objects and naming them in their native tongue. Though communication remained limited, a bond began to form between them. Clara marveled at their resilience, their ability to adapt despite everything they'd endured. And though she didn't realize it yet, these children were changing her too, filling the emptiness left by her husband's death with laughter and purpose. As weeks turned into months, Clara found herself growing more attached to the trio. They weren't just visitors anymore. They were part of her life, part of her home. Yet deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that their presence was temporary. Somewhere out there, someone must be looking for them, someone who loved them as much as she had come to. That thought both comforted and terrified her, for she knew that when the time came, letting them go would break her heart all over again. As the weeks passed, Clara settled into a new routine with the children. Every morning began with the sun rising over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The ranch came alive with the sounds of roosters crowing, cattle lowing, and the rhythmic clatter of hooves against the dry earth. Inside the house, Clara would wake to find the children already stirring, eager to help with the day's tasks. Though they still spoke little English, their actions spoke volumes. They had become a team, working together to keep the ranch running smoothly. Nkosi, the youngest boy, took charge of feeding the chickens and collecting eggs. His small hands were surprisingly steady as he reached under the hens, pulling out warm eggs one by one. Whenever he brought the basket to Clara, his face lit up with pride, as if he'd accomplished something monumental. The older boy, whose name Clara learned was Taza, was fascinated by the horses. He spent hours brushing their coats, marveling at their strength and grace. Sometimes he would stand near the corral, watching Clara ride and mimicking her movements with an imaginary horse. It made her smile to see him so absorbed. The girl, Noya, proved to be a quick learner when it came to cooking. Clara taught her how to knead dough for bread and stir pots of stew over the fire. Noya's eyes sparkled with curiosity as she watched the ingredients transform into meals. She even started experimenting on her own, adding herbs and spices she found growing wild around the ranch. One evening, she surprised Clara with a bowl of soup flavored with sage and wild onions. It was delicious, and Clara couldn't help but laugh at the shy grin that spread across Noya's face. Despite these moments of joy, there were still reminders of the pain the children had endured. Clara noticed how they flinched at loud noises, like the crack of a whip or the sudden bark of a dog. They rarely spoke about their past, but sometimes in quiet moments, fragments of their story emerged. Through broken words and gestures, Clara pieced together that their father, a man named Tahu, was a warrior who had been captured during a conflict with settlers. Believing him dead, their tribe had scattered, leaving the children behind. Alone and afraid, they had wandered the plains until hunger and exhaustion forced them to stop under the mesquite tree where Clara found them. Clara felt a deep anger toward the world that could abandon such innocent souls. But more than anger, she felt a fierce determination to protect them. She vowed to give them a safe haven, even if only for a little while. Yet, As much as she cared for them, she couldn't ignore the ache of uncertainty gnawing at her heart. What would happen if their father returned? Would he take them away from her? And if he did, would they want to leave? One afternoon, while mending a broken fence post near the edge of the property, Clara spotted a figure in the distance. At first, she thought it was just another traveler passing through, but something about the way the person moved caught her attention. He rode a weary-looking horse, its ribs visible beneath its coat, and his posture was slumped, as though weighed down by fatigue. As he drew closer, Clara's breath caught in her throat. There was something familiar about him, the sharp angles of his face, the way he scanned the land with piercing eyes. Her stomach tightened as she realized who he might be. The man stopped a few yards away, his gaze locking onto hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, slowly, he dismounted, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. "You have seen my children?" he asked in halting English, his voice rough but steady. Clara's heart raced. This was Tahu, the father the children had spoken of. Up close, he looked nothing like the proud warrior they had described. His face was lined with scars, both physical and emotional, and his once muscular frame was now thin and worn. Yet, there was no mistaking the intensity in his eyes, an unyielding determination to find what he had lost. Clara nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Gesturing for him to follow, she led him back to the ranch. Along the way, she stole glances at him, trying to imagine the kind of man who could inspire such loyalty in his children. He walked with a limp, favoring one leg, but his steps were deliberate, as though each movement carried the weight of purpose. When they reached the house, Clara opened the door and called out softly. The children appeared almost instantly, their faces lighting up with shock and disbelief. For a moment they stood frozen, staring at the man before them. Then, with cries of joy, they ran into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Tahu sank to his knees, pulling his children close as tears streamed down his weathered cheeks. Clara watched from the doorway, her own eyes brimming with emotion. She had known this moment would come, but nothing could have prepared her for the raw power of it. The love between Tahu and his children was palpable, a force that transcended language and culture. As she turned away to give them privacy, Clara felt a pang of loss, not for herself but for the life they had built together, however temporary it had been. Over the next few days, Tahu stayed at the ranch, recovering his strength and reconnecting with his children. He listened intently as they told him stories of their time with Clara, their voices animated with excitement. They showed him the chores they had learned, the animals they had cared for, and the meals they had cooked. Tahu watched silently, his expression unreadable, but Clara noticed the way his eyes softened whenever he looked at them. He seemed amazed by the transformation in his children, not just physically, but emotionally. They were no longer the frightened, starving kids he had left behind. They were strong, confident, and full of life. During this time, an unspoken understanding grew between Clara and Tahu. Though they came from different worlds, they shared a mutual respect born of hardship and resilience. Tahu marveled at how Clara had taken in his children without hesitation, nurturing them back to health and teaching them skills that would serve them well. In turn, Clara admired Tahu's quiet dignity and unwavering devotion to his family. They communicated mostly through gestures and simple words, but their connection needed no translation. Before departing, Tahu offered Clara a beautifully crafted knife, its handle adorned with intricate carvings of bison and stars. "For you," he said, his voice thick with gratitude. "You saved them." Clara accepted the gift with trembling hands, unsure of what to say. Finally, she managed a soft, "Thank you," though it felt woefully inadequate. As Tahu mounted his horse, his children clinging to him tightly, Clara waved until they disappeared over the horizon. The ranch felt emptier than ever, but her heart was full, overflowing with memories of laughter, courage, and connection. In the days that followed, Clara returned to her routines, finding solace in the familiar rhythms of ranch life. Yet, something within her had shifted. She no longer saw herself as merely a survivor of loss, but as someone who had made a difference and who had been forever altered by the experience. The children's presence had reminded her of the beauty of family, even in its most unexpected forms. And though they were gone, their impact lingered, woven into the fabric of her life like threads of gold. Clara continued living, carrying the weight and warmth of her journey with grace and purpose. The days after Tahu and his children left felt longer than ever for Clara. The ranch, once filled with the sounds of laughter and tiny footsteps, now echoed with silence. She went about her chores as usual, feeding the cattle, mending fences, and tending to the crops. But there was a heaviness in her chest that no amount of work could ease. Every corner of the house reminded her of the children. The kitchen still smelled faintly of sage from Noya's soups, and the corral bore the marks of Taza's endless practice with the horses. Even the chickens seemed quieter without Nokosi's cheerful chatter. Clara tried not to dwell on their absence, but it was hard. At night, when the stars stretched across the vast Texas sky, she would sit by the fire and think about them. Where were they now? Were they safe? Had they found a new home where they could start over? These questions haunted her, yet she knew there was no way to answer them. All she had was the memory of their time together, and the small knife Tahu had given her as a token of gratitude. It sat on her bedside table, its carvings catching the light whenever she passed by. Each time she looked at it, she felt a mix of pride and sadness. Pride because she had helped save those children, sadness because she missed them more than she thought possible. One morning, as Clara watered the vegetable garden, she noticed something unusual near the fence line. A lone figure standing just beyond her property. Her heart skipped a beat. Was it Tahu? Had he returned? Grabbing her hat, she hurried toward the figure, squinting against the bright sunlight. As she drew closer, however, she realized it wasn't Tahu. Instead, it was an older Comanche man, his hair streaked with gray and his face lined with age. He wore a fringed leather tunic and carried a staff carved with symbols she didn't recognize. His presence was calm yet commanding, and he watched her approach with steady eyes. "Who are you?" Clara asked cautiously, stopping a few feet away. The man tilted his head, studying her as if trying to decide whether she was friend or foe. Finally, he spoke in broken English. "I am Nahele," he said, "brother to Tahu." Clara's breath caught. So this was Tahu's family, come to see where his children had stayed. Nahele gestured toward the ranch, his expression softening. "They speak of you," he said. "My brother's children. They tell stories of kindness here." Clara nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. She motioned for him to follow her back to the house, where she offered him water and a seat at the table. Nahele accepted graciously, though his gaze remained sharp and observant. As they sat together, Clara learned more about him and his connection to Tahu. Nahele explained that he had been part of the search party looking for the missing children. When Tahu returned with them, he told everyone about the widowed rancher, who had taken them in. Intrigued, Nahele decided to visit her himself, to thank her and to see the place that had sheltered his nephew and nieces during their darkest days. As they talked, Clara realized how much the children meant not only to Tahu but to their entire tribe. To lose them had been devastating, and finding them alive was nothing short of miraculous. Nahele described the joy in the village when the children arrived home, their faces round and healthy again. He also shared bits of their culture, the importance of family, the bond between humans and nature, and the belief that every act of kindness created ripples that touched countless lives. Listening to him, Clara felt a deep respect for their way of life, so different from her own yet rooted in values she understood all too well. Before leaving, Nahele handed Clara a small pouch made of deerskin. Inside was a handful of dried herbs and a smooth stone painted with red and black patterns. "For protection," he said simply. Then, pointing to the knife Tahu had given her, he added, "And for remembering." Clara thanked him, her voice thick with emotion. As Nahele rode off into the distance, she felt a renewed sense of connection, not just to the children but to their people and their traditions. In the weeks that followed, Clara found herself thinking less about what she had lost and more about what she had gained. The children's stay had changed her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Before they arrived, she had been content to live alone, focusing solely on survival. But now, she saw the world differently. She understood the power of compassion, the strength in vulnerability, and the beauty of forming bonds across barriers, of language and culture. The ranch, once a lonely expanse of land, now felt like a bridge, a place where two worlds had briefly met and transformed each other. One afternoon, while sorting through her late husband's belongings in the attic, Clara stumbled upon an old journal he had kept. Flipping through its pages, she discovered sketches of animals, notes about weather patterns, and musings about life on the ranch. Toward the end, there was a passage that caught her eye. A ranch is more than land or livestock. It's a story, written in sweat and soil, shaped by those who walk its paths. Reading those words brought tears to her eyes. Her husband had always believed in the magic of the land, and now she understood why. The ranch wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever set foot on it, leaving behind a piece of themselves. Inspired, Clara decided to write her own story. Not just for herself, but for the children, in case they ever wondered about the woman who had cared for them during their time of need. She began jotting down memories. The first night she found them under the mesquite tree, the day Nokosi helped stack firewood, the moment Tahu returned and held his children close. Writing became a form of healing, a way to keep their spirits alive within her. Sometimes she imagined them reading her words someday, knowing they had left an indelible mark on her heart. Life on the ranch continued, steady and predictable. Yet there was a new richness to it, a depth Clara hadn't known before. She started planting flowers around the house, adding splashes of color to the otherwise rugged landscape. She taught herself traditional recipes using ingredients she found growing wild, inspired by Noya's creativity in the kitchen. And she began riding her horse farther than ever, exploring parts of the property she had neglected for years. With each passing day, she felt more alive, more connected to the land and to herself. Then one crisp autumn morning, a knock at the door startled her. Opening it, she found a traveling trader standing on her porch, holding a rolled-up parchment. "This came for you," he said, handing it over. Clara took the paper, puzzled. Unrolling it, she gasped. It was a drawing of a bison, etched carefully onto the parchment, surrounded by swirling patterns that resembled stars. Beneath it was a note written in shaky English. "We remember you. You are part of our story now." Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she clutched the drawing to her chest. It was from the children, or perhaps Tahu himself. Whoever had sent it, the message was clear. Their lives were intertwined forever. Clara stepped outside, gazing at the horizon where Tahu and his family had disappeared months ago. Though miles separated them, she felt closer to them than ever. The ranch might be quiet again, but it was far from empty. It was filled with memories, lessons, and love, a testament to the unexpected ways life can bring people together. From that day forward, Clara embraced her role as both rancher and storyteller. She tended to her animals and crops with renewed energy, knowing that every task was part of a larger narrative. And when visitors stopped by, curious about the woman living alone in such a vast wilderness, she welcomed them warmly, sharing tales of resilience, hope, and the enduring power of human connection. The children may have been gone, but their influence remained, shaping her journey in ways she never could have imagined. As the seasons changed, so did Clara's life on the ranch. The golden hues of autumn gave way to the crisp chill of winter, and the fields lay dormant under a blanket of frost. Despite the cold, Clara found herself busier than ever. She spent her days chopping firewood, repairing fences battered by wind, and tending to the animals that depended on her for warmth and food. Yet, even as she worked tirelessly, her thoughts often drifted back to the Comanche family who had touched her life in ways she couldn't have predicted. The drawing of the bison, etched carefully onto parchment, hung proudly on the wall near her table. It was a constant reminder of the bond she shared with Tahu and his children, a bond that transcended distance and time. Every morning, As sunlight streamed through the window, Clara would glance at it and smile. The note beneath, "It means we remember you. You are part of our story now," had become a kind of mantra for her. It reminded her that kindness, no matter how small, could leave ripples far beyond what she might see. Winter passed slowly, but spring arrived with a burst of life. Wildflowers bloomed across the plains, painting the landscape in vibrant colors. Birds returned from their migrations, filling the air with cheerful songs. Clara welcomed the change, feeling a renewed sense of energy as she prepared the fields for planting. This year, however, she decided to do something different. Inspired by Noya's love for cooking and experimenting with flavors, Clara began planting herbs and vegetables she'd never grown before: sage, thyme, and even a patch of wild onions. She imagined the children would approve, perhaps even laugh, at her attempts if they were here to see them. One sunny afternoon, while watering her new garden, Clara heard hoofbeats approaching. She straightened up, shielding her eyes against the glare of the sun, and saw two riders making their way toward the ranch. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be Tahu again? As they drew closer, she realized it wasn't him, but rather Nahele, accompanied by a younger man she didn't recognize. Both dismounted and greeted her warmly, their expressions friendly yet serious. Nahele introduced the younger man as Kanti, another relative of Tahu's. "He is cousin," Nahele explained. "He brings news." Clara nodded, inviting them inside, and offering water. Once seated, Kanti spoke hesitantly in broken English, explaining that Tahu's village had faced hardships since his return. A drought had struck their lands, leaving crops sparse and water scarce. Though they had managed to survive, many families struggled daily just to find enough food. Hearing this, Clara felt a pang of worry. Were Tahu and the children safe? Did they have enough to eat? Kanti assured her that Tahu's family was doing well, thanks in part to the strength and resilience they had gained during their time with Clara. "They speak often of you," he said, "of your kindness, your teaching." He paused, then added, "Tahu says you gave them not just food but hope." Clara's throat tightened. She hadn't thought of herself as someone who gave hope. She had simply done what felt right. But hearing these words made her realize how much impact a single act of compassion could have. Determined to help, she asked Kanti and Nahele what she could do. They exchanged glances. Then Kanti explained that their village needed supplies, seeds, for planting, tools for farming, and blankets to keep warm during the coming winter. Though they were proud people, they knew they couldn't face these challenges alone. Without hesitation, Clara agreed to help. Over the next few weeks, she gathered everything she could spare. She packed sacks of seeds saved from her own harvest, sturdy shovels and hoes from her shed, and woolen blankets she had woven herself. She even included jars of preserves and dried meats, knowing how valuable such provisions would be. As she worked, memories of the children flooded her mind, their laughter, their curiosity, their determination to learn. It fueled her resolve to give whatever she could. When the supplies were ready, Clara loaded them onto her wagon and hitched her strongest horse to it. Together with Nahele and Kanti, she set out early one morning, heading toward the Comanche village. The journey was long and arduous, taking several days across rugged terrain. Along the way, Clara marveled at the vastness of the land and the beauty of the wilderness. She also learned more about the Comanche way of life. Listening intently as Nahele and Kanti shared stories of their ancestors, their struggles, and their deep connection to the earth. Finally, they reached the village, a cluster of teepees nestled in a valley surrounded by rolling hills. Smoke curled lazily from cooking fires and children played nearby, their laughter echoing through the air. Clara stepped down from the wagon, suddenly nervous. Would the villagers welcome her? Or would they see her as an outsider, unworthy of trust? Her worries vanished the moment Tahu appeared. His face lit up with surprise and gratitude as he approached her. "You came," he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. Behind him, Nkosi, Taza, and Noya ran forward, throwing their arms around her legs. Clara laughed, tears streaming down her face as she hugged them tightly. They looked healthier and happier than ever, their eyes shining with joy. The villagers gathered around, curious about the woman who had traveled so far to bring aid. Tahu explained who Clara was and what she had done, not just for his family, but now for the entire village. There were murmurs of thanks, nods of respect, and smiles of appreciation. Clara felt overwhelmed by their warmth and generosity. That evening, a feast was held in her honor. The food was simple but delicious: roasted rabbit, cornbread, and stews flavored with herbs Clara recognized from her own kitchen. She sat beside Tahu and his family, sharing stories and laughter late into the night. During her stay, Clara immersed herself in village life. She helped the women grind corn and weave baskets, learning techniques passed down through generations. She joined the men in repairing tools and setting traps, marveling at their ingenuity and skill. Most importantly, she spent time with the children, teaching them games she remembered from her own childhood and listening as they recounted tales of their adventures since returning home. Each moment deepened her understanding of their culture and strengthened the bond they shared. Before leaving, Clara received a gift from the village, a beautifully crafted necklace made of turquoise and silver. Tahu placed it around her neck, saying, "This is for courage, for heart." Clara touched the cool stones, overwhelmed by the gesture. She promised to visit again whenever she could, vowing to remain a part of their lives no matter where fate took them. The journey back to the ranch was bittersweet. Clara missed the children already, longing to hear their voices and see their smiles. Yet she felt lighter somehow, as though a weight she hadn't known she carried had been lifted. Helping the village had reminded her of her own strength and purpose. She wasn't just a widowed rancher struggling to survive. She was a link in a chain of humanity, connected to others through acts of kindness and shared experiences. Back at the ranch, Clara resumed her routines, but with a newfound sense of fulfillment. She planted more crops than ever before, imagining the surplus she could share with the village next year. She repaired the old windmill her husband had worked on, finding comfort in the familiar creak of its blades turning in the breeze. And every night as she gazed at the stars, she thought of Tahu, his children, and the villagers who had welcomed her into their lives. Though miles separated them, Clara knew they were never truly apart. Their stories were intertwined now, written in the soil of the ranch and the hearts of those who called it home. Whether through letters, visits, or simply the memory of shared moments, their connection would endure, a testament to the power of compassion and the unbreakable ties that bind us all. The months that followed Clara's visit to the Comanche village brought both challenges and rewards. The ranch thrived under her care, as if the land itself had been invigorated by the sense of purpose she now carried. The fields were lush with crops, the animals healthy and strong, and the house filled with the faint scent of herbs drying in bunches from the rafters. Yet, despite the prosperity around her, Clara often found herself gazing toward the horizon, wondering about Tahu and his family. She had promised to stay connected, but letters were slow to arrive in such remote places, and traders passing through rarely brought news. One morning, as Clara watered the garden, she noticed a figure on horseback approaching from the distance. At first, she thought it was another traveler seeking directions or shelter, but as the rider drew closer, her heart leapt. It was Noya, the girl who had once stood shyly in her kitchen, learning to knead dough. Now, Noya sat tall and confident, on her horse, her hair braided neatly and adorned with beads. Behind her trailed a small pack horse loaded with bundles wrapped in colorful blankets. Clara dropped the watering can and hurried to meet her. "Noya!" she called out, waving enthusiastically. The girl smiled brightly, dismounting with ease and embracing Clara warmly. It was a moment neither of them had expected so soon, yet it felt as natural as breathing. Noya explained that her father Tahu had sent her to deliver gifts and messages from the village. He wanted Clara to know how much her help had meant to them and to thank her for everything she had done. Inside the house, Noya unpacked the bundles one by one. There was smoked venison, jars of honeycomb, woven baskets, and even a beautifully embroidered shawl. Each item told a story of gratitude, of survival, of shared humanity. As they sorted through the gifts, Noya began to share tales of life in the village. The drought had eased slightly, allowing some crops to grow, though challenges remained. Still, the people persevered, drawing strength from their traditions and each other. Noya spoke proudly of her role in helping tend to the younger children, teaching them songs and stories passed down from elders. Clara listened intently, marveling at how much Noya had grown since their last meeting. Gone was the timid child who flinched at every sound. In her place stood a young woman full of confidence and grace. To see this transformation firsthand filled Clara with pride, not just for Noya, but for herself, knowing she had played a small part in shaping the girl's journey. Over the next few days, Noya stayed at the ranch, eager to relearn old tasks and discover new ones. Together, they baked bread using wild onions and sage, laughed while chasing chickens, and rode horses across the open plains. One afternoon, as they sat beneath a sprawling oak tree, Noya pulled out a small leather pouch and handed it to Clara. Inside was a delicate necklace made of tiny shells and turquoise beads. "For you," Noya said softly, "to remember us." Clara's eyes welled with tears as she accepted the gift. She wore it immediately, feeling its weight against her chest like a promise, a reminder of the bond they shared. That evening, as they cooked dinner together, Clara asked Noya about her dreams for the future. The question caught Noya off guard, and for a moment she hesitated. Then, with quiet determination, she spoke of wanting to become a healer, someone who could care for her people when illness struck or injuries occurred. Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of deep conviction. Inspired by Noya's ambition, Clara decided to teach her everything she knew about remedies and healing. Over the following days, they gathered plants from the surrounding area, yarrow for wounds, mint for stomach aches, and lavender for calming nerves. Clara showed Noya how to dry and store the herbs properly, explaining their uses and dosages. In return, Noya taught Clara traditional Comanche prayers and rituals, meant to honor the earth and give thanks for its bounty. Their exchange was a blending of worlds, each enriching the other in ways neither had anticipated. When it came time for Noya to leave, both women felt a pang of sadness. They had grown close again, their connection stronger than ever. Before departing, Noya hugged Clara tightly, whispering, "You are family to me." Clara nodded, too choked up to speak. As Noya rode away, the sun casting long shadows across the plains, Clara waved until she disappeared over the horizon. The ranch felt quieter once more, but not empty. Noya's presence lingered in the laughter they had shared, the lessons they had exchanged, and the love that bound them together. In the weeks that followed, Clara threw herself into her work with renewed vigor. She expanded her herb garden, planting rows of medicinal plants alongside vegetables and flowers. She repaired the barn roof, fortified the corral, and built a sturdy pen for raising goats, a suggestion Noya had made during her visit. Every task was infused with meaning, a way to honor the ties she had forged with Tahu's family and their community. Then, one crisp autumn morning, a letter arrived via a traveling trader. It was written in shaky English, clearly penned by someone unaccustomed to the language. Clara recognized Tahu's voice in the words, "We are well, the rains have come, our people are strong, you are remembered always." Enclosed with the letter was a small pouch containing dried berries and a feather painted with intricate designs. Clara held the items close, imagining Tahu sitting by a fire, carefully choosing each word to express his gratitude. The letter inspired Clara to write back. She described the changes at the ranch, the growth of her gardens, and her plans for the coming year. She included sketches of the animals and landscapes, hoping to bring a smile to Tahu and his family. When the trader returned weeks later, she entrusted him with her reply, along with a bundle of blankets and preserves. As winter approached, Clara prepared the ranch for the colder months ahead. She stacked firewood neatly near the house, checked the sturdiness of the fences, and ensured the animals had enough hay to last through the snow. Yet even as she worked, her mind wandered to the Comanche village. Were they warm enough? Did they have enough food? She prayed silently that they would endure the season safely, drawing strength from their unity and resilience. On Christmas Eve, as a light snow dusted the ground, Clara lit a candle in the window, a tradition she had started after her husband's passing. This year, however, the gesture carried extra significance. It wasn't just for him. It was for everyone who had touched her life, especially Tahu, Noya, and the rest of their family. As she sat by the fire, sipping hot cider and watching the flames dance, she reflected on how far she had come. Once a lonely widow burdened by grief, she was now a woman connected to others through acts of kindness and shared experiences. Life on the ranch continued, steady and predictable, yet richer than ever before. Clara no longer saw herself as merely surviving. She was thriving, finding joy in the smallest moments. Whether it was the sight of wildflowers blooming in spring, the sound of birds returning after winter, or the memory of Noya's laughter echoing through the fields, she cherished it all. The ranch was no longer just a piece of land, it was a tapestry of stories, woven together by the lives that had crossed its paths. And so Clara embraced her role as caretaker, storyteller, and friend. She tended to her animals and crops with love, knowing that every seed planted and every hoof tended contributed to something greater. Visitors passing through often remarked on the warmth of her home, the vibrancy of her gardens, and the kindness in her eyes. To them, she shared tales of resilience, hope, and the enduring power of human connection. Though miles separated her from the Comanche family, she knew they were never truly apart. Their stories were intertwined forever, written in the soil of the ranch and the hearts of those who called it home. Years passed, and the ranch became a place of legend in the small community that surrounded it. Clara's story was told often, how she had taken in 3 starving Comanche children, how she had helped their village during a time of great need, and how her kindness had bridged 2 very different worlds. People marveled at her strength and generosity, but to Clara, it felt like nothing extraordinary. She had simply done what anyone with a heart would have done. The ranch itself reflected the changes in her life. The fields were lush and abundant, producing enough crops to feed not only herself but also to share with neighbors and travelers passing through. Her herb garden flourished, filled with plants that healed both body and spirit. Wildflowers bloomed along the fence lines, their colors bright against the golden plains. Even the animals seemed happier, as if they too understood the warmth and care Clara poured into everything she touched. Though Clara rarely saw Tahu or his family in person, their connection remained strong. Letters arrived sporadically, carried by traders or wandering cowboys who happened upon the village. Each note brought updates about the children, how Nkosi had become an expert tracker, how Taza could ride faster than anyone in the tribe, and how Noya was learning the ways of a healer under the guidance of the village elders. Clara cherished these letters, reading them over and over until the ink began to fade. In return, she wrote back faithfully, sharing stories of the ranch, describing the changing seasons, and sending gifts whenever she could, dried herbs, jars of honey, or hand-sewn blankets. One summer afternoon, as Clara worked in her garden, she noticed a cloud of dust rising on the horizon. It wasn't unusual for visitors to stop by, seeking water or rest, but something about this group felt different. As they drew closer, her breath caught in her throat. Leading the procession was Tahu, flanked by his children and several other members of the village. They rode slowly, their horses weary from the journey, but their faces lit up when they saw Clara waiting at the gate. Clara ran to meet them, tears streaming down her face as she embraced each one tightly. Nkosi, now taller and broader-shouldered, grinned sheepishly, while Taza proudly showed off the feathers tied to his horse's bridle, a sign of his growing status among the warriors. Noya stood beside her father, her posture confident and her eyes shining with pride. Seeing them all together again filled Clara with a joy so profound it nearly overwhelmed her. Tahu explained that the village had sent them on a special mission, to thank Clara personally for all she had done. "You gave us hope," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Now we bring hope to you." With that, the villagers unloaded their wagons, revealing bundles of goods, handmade blankets, intricately beaded moccasins, cured meats, and pottery painted with vibrant designs. It was more than just a gift, it was a symbol of gratitude, a testament to the bond they shared. For days, the ranch buzzed with activity. The villagers set up camp near the barn, sharing meals, songs, and stories with Clara. They taught her new skills: how to weave baskets using willow branches, how to tan hides, and how to track game across the plains. In turn, Clara showed them techniques for farming in dry soil, preserving food for winter and caring for livestock. Their exchange was seamless, blending traditions and knowledge in a way that enriched everyone involved. During quiet moments, Clara spent time alone with Tahu and his children, catching up on the years they had been apart. Nkosi spoke excitedly about tracking deer and teaching younger boys how to hunt. Taza described the thrill of racing horses across open fields, his laughter echoing through the air. Noya, now a young woman, shared her dreams of becoming a healer, explaining how she combined traditional remedies with the lessons Clara had taught her. Listening to them, Clara felt a deep sense of fulfillment. These children, who had once been frightened and starving, were now thriving, carrying forward the values and skills she had instilled in them. On the final evening of their visit, the Ayur villagers held a ceremony to honor Clara. They gathered around a roaring fire, singing songs in their native tongue and performing dances that told stories of courage and resilience. When the music ended, Tahu stepped forward holding a beautifully crafted bow. Its wood was polished to a shine, and its string gleamed in the firelight. He presented it to Clara, saying, "This is for your strength, for your heart." Clara accepted the gift with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the gesture. She didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded, her eyes filled with tears. That night, as the stars stretched endlessly above them, she realized that her life had come, full circle. Once a widow struggling to survive, she was now a woman whose actions had touched countless lives. The ranch was no longer just a place. It was a bridge between worlds, a testament to the power of compassion and understanding. After the villagers departed, Clara returned to her routines, but something within her had shifted. She no longer saw herself as separate from the world around her. Instead, she felt connected, to the land, to the people she had helped, and to the legacy she was creating. Every task she performed carried meaning, every moment was infused with purpose. Whether it was tending to her animals, planting seeds, in the garden, or writing letters to distant friends, she approached life with a sense of gratitude and wonder. As the years went by, Clara grew older, her hair streaked with gray and her hands gnarled from decades of hard work. Yet her spirit remained youthful, fueled by memories of the children she had loved and the lives she had touched. Visitors still came to the ranch, drawn by the stories they had heard. To them, Clara shared tales of resilience and hope, reminding them that even in the harshest times, kindness could change the course of a life. When Clara finally passed away, surrounded by the beauty of the ranch she had nurtured, the community mourned her loss deeply. But they also celebrated her legacy, a legacy of love, courage, and unity. Her grave was marked by a simple stone, etched with the image of a bison and the words, "She opened her heart to strangers and changed the world." And so, the story of Clara, the widowed rancher who took in starving Comanche triplets and altered their lives forever, became part of the fabric of the land. Her ranch continued to thrive, cared for by those who understood its importance. And though she was gone, her spirit lived on in every blade of grass, every hoofprint in the dirt, and every act of kindness inspired by her example.